I'm Michael Anders with Shape Up Fitness and Wellness Consulting, and I'm a runner. I lift weights, and most importantly, I train people for longevity and from injury to performance. So am I a physical therapist? No. I have a master's degree in sports science and sports medicine, and I started out as a personal trainer. More and more went into the field of helping people recover from injuries, and primarily after they were done with physical therapy and were just still not really being able to perform. And we also focus on the older population too, because longevity is a big thing, right? We're living longer and we're not necessarily living better. And to answer some of the questions that you're having, and as well hopefully motivate you to actually take the journey. Since I cannot keep this whole presentation in my head, I've got my computer here and I will talk to you this way. Now let's get started. Can you make significant fitness progress after the age of 40 without pharmaceutical help, right? We're talking hormone replacement therapy, all that good jazz, or we're talking anabolic steroids. You know, might be going to the gym, do a little bit of trend, you know, like whatever. That's actually pretty common, much more common than most people suspect. And it can be quite frustrating when you as a normal mortal go in and work out and you're like, well, dude, so-and-so after 3 months was like, what's going on with me? And well, you're doing it without that pharmaceutical help. So age is not the sole factor that defines of what you are capable of doing. So decline is actually fairly slow. 30s, we're talking about strength, all that good jazz. Endurance, all that decline is fairly slow in the beginning, and a lot of that can be really effectively trained. There are a couple of examples for there. For example, there is Sister Madonna Buder. She's a nun who, you know, performed a triathlon at the age of 86. So clearly 40 is very far away from 86. Got more than half of your life to go. She did it at age 86. Pretty impressive, right? But there's another lady out here, and her name was Ernestina Shepherd. She was a female bodybuilder in her 80s and looked phenomenal. Now, I cannot guarantee here if she is getting some help or not, but regardless of the fact if she does or not, like, your body does still improve. Now, or Ed Whitlock, who at age 85 runs marathons who are sub 4 hours. I mean, like, a lot of people have struggled to do sub 5 hours. This man runs it at 85, or ran at 85 under 4 hours. So those are impressive things, and those are also people that are much further along in the process, and it shows that amazing things are accomplishable. Ernest Tuff is another guy, deadlifts over 441 pounds at age 80. Here we are at age 40. You probably are not lifting that. Like, very few fit people lift that kind of. But that means while these people might be exceptional, that there is hope for you and for me. Now, let's look at metabolically and cardiovascular risk in women. We definitely know that menopause is associated with a significant increase in metabolic changes, and that the cholesterol levels like jump up, that atherogenic lipoproteins go up, which means like you're at a higher risk for cardiovascular disease, and you also have some changes in amino acids concentration, which also contributes to the metabolic disease here. Now, on top of it, the immune system changes. So since women don't already go through enough, the immune system changes. So there's pro-inflammatory markers in the system. There's immune cell activity. You're more likely to get chronic diseases and have higher infections. That sounds just fabulous, doesn't it? Well, we're gonna keep going here. Like, well, there will be a little bit more. Cognitive decline. So obesity is linked to severe cognitive decline, or rather increased risk for Alzheimer's disease. It is also linked to vascular dementia. So obesity and mental health is not a good thing. So it's definitely something we want to avoid. And then we have obviously higher cortisol response, which also is linked to age-related issues, depression, Alzheimer's, and metabolic syndrome. Now, this is all pretty hefty, obviously. That's a lot that hits us, but bam, 40 hits and you're a goner. That's not the case. A lot of those things are often related to our lifestyle. So if we improve our lifestyle, if we make sure that we get enough sleep, then a lot of things can improve, and you can actually kick quite some butt at a later point, as you could tell by the examples that I named earlier. So one of the common myths that we have is that you just cannot get stronger anymore. That's a myth. It's complete nonsense. Like you can get muscle and you can gain strength. Is it the same as when you were at your peak at around age 19, 20, 21, 22? No, it's not. Okay, it's not. You have to train also smarter. You're more prone to injury. Or like we just mentioned, like there's a bunch of changes going on, but you can definitely improve. So endurance wise, there is often the fear that it just can't get any better. Like we're just stuck. And that kind of thinking is really not true. It has shown that endurance can be improved well into the 70s, and which would also be proven by what we've seen earlier by these examples, and obviously those are just examples, but research actually indicates that, hey, you know what, you're not screwed, you might be able to make improvements. Then another misconception is that high intensity exercise is too dangerous. If you are someone who has already a good bit of risk factors and you struggle with things like high blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, you might have to be careful and you might have to get checked out by your doctor to make sure that you get clearance for high intensity exercises. However, if you are good to go with that, if you don't have any issues on that end, then you can actually have a really good workout with that, and it can be very effective. Now they train your VO2 max. I mean, it can be a pretty darn good thing for you because VO2 max is very closely related to a mortality rate. So hey, looks to me that that's something that is worth exploring depending on what your ability is. Now, some people say, well, I can't go run anymore. That's okay, that's cool. Nobody says you need to run. You can hop on the bicycle, you can hop on the elliptical. There are so many variations of work that you can do. Cardio is all that you need. Yeah, that's one of those things. That's a hard no. Cardio does not make you stronger. I know if I get to hear like people like, oh yeah, it does train my legs, and no, it doesn't. If you are really out of shape, yes, you will probably get stronger initially when you do cardiovascular activity. However, cardiovascular activity by itself reaches a peak there at some point. After that, nothing happens anymore. And that peak is not necessarily enough for you to live your life. So I heard somewhere like that a good number of people in their 50s have the cardiovascular ability that they need to have in their 90s in order to live their life independently. If you think about this, that is terrible. But that's not because they got old or older. That is because they haven't done the work to sustain that or to train it again. So next on, we have weight gain is inevitable. That's a no. Weight can be managed and reversed with the appropriate tools, and understanding that changes in your body have led to things in where you need to adapt. So if you haven't done a lot and you have gained weight, then you most likely have a relatively low muscle mass in your body. So, especially if you're chair-bound, if you work in an office, stuff like that. If that's the case, then your metabolic rate is relatively low and you're more likely to gain weight, and you have to probably eat a little bit less than somebody who was physically active the whole time. So they're burning actively calories. They also have a lot higher lean muscle mass tissue on their body, which also is a wonderful thing when it comes to your metabolism. So weight can be managed and it can be reversed. Recovery takes too long. That's true. Recovery takes longer. Like, we will not say that your recovery is the same at age 40, 50, and 60 as it was at age 20, 25, 30. It does take a little bit longer. However, it's all about working smarter. Like when we're in our 20s, you could throw shit at us and something would stick and we're like, oh look, I got some biceps. Oh, like I'm running a little bit faster. Now you went out running, like you have the ideal setup and you're just faster now. That's great. Good for you. At age 40, yeah, we got to work a little bit smarter, right? Like, so if we go out there, our recovery takes a little bit longer, but you know, like, so if we run one day, maybe the next day we're not doing running, we'll maybe lift some weights. No, great. Works great. Can help us, and we have a different stimulus. Bam! More bang for your buck. I'm all for it. So you need to work out every day. Oh hell no, absolutely not. I don't work out every day. I mean, this is what I do. I don't work out every day. Like, I work out a lot. I will be the first person to admit that. But there are people who work out a lot more than I do. So you can be really fit with a lot less than you think. It really depends on what you want to accomplish. There is an ideal version, and then there is the version that works for you. You can be pretty strong if you lift 2 days a week. Will you be a bodybuilder and you have an Adonis figure? No, you don't. It's not gonna happen. Will, if you run twice a week, will you become all of a sudden like, will you be at the next Olympic trials? Very unlikely. However, you can be pretty fit. You are definitely a lot fitter than everybody else in your age group who doesn't do anything. If you work out 1 day a week and you increase it from 0 to 1, that's a huge bonus. Especially if you haven't done anything, you will actually see an improvement. If you do it twice a week, oh my God. If you do it 3 times a week, that's even better. But at some point, as you increase, you will have diminishing returns. So you put in more effort, but the returns are going kind of down. There will not be as much. It will still get better. Still be better than 3 days or 2 days or 1 day, but will be a little bit less. So like, for example, like my dad, he's 81. He's 81 years old. He lifts 3 days a week. He does cardio 3 days a week. Because he can, he plays on a volleyball team at age 81. Was he always a symbol of health? No, he actually survived 4 different kinds of cancers. So is actually supposed to not be with us anymore. He is though. He's an amazing dude. So proud of him. And he did not start working out like this until he was 76. So there's still hope. If there's hope for him, he was always doing a little bit something, was always physically active, so he was not a total slouch, but he didn't really lift 3 days a week and does cardio 3 days a week until then. But it made a huge difference. Now, you can be as fit as a 20-year-old. Well, you're not wrong. Your potential is not there, right? Like if you're older, your potential is not quite as high as it was as a 20-year-old. However, if your 20-year-old was lazy, there's a chance you might surpass your 20-year-old. And the reality is, even somebody who's in the 70s can be as fit as somebody who is a normal 40-year-old. So a 40-year-old doesn't really have a lot of restrictions in life unless they're really out of shape. So is age just a number? No, age is not just a number. We do age. Age has a negative impact on us, but it is something that can be managed and it can be pushed out, and you can maintain a pretty high standard throughout the most parts of your life. And you shouldn't let things like magazine articles will tell you, oh, at age 44, this is when people all age. And then age 60 or 65, that's when it goes down to shit again. Always remember that often things that are not taken into consideration with articles like this is that you are also going through a lot of different phases in your life. You know, higher stress, people in their 40s are often at the peak of their career. So that ages, you know, stress with kids, with a partner. And then in your 60s, you know, there's like the transition to being retired and maybe worrying about that. So there's a lot of different things that play a role here. So with the right approach in training and recovery, you can be immensely fit at age 40, 50, 60, 70, even 80. Now, will you be as great and fit and as capable at 80 as you are at age 20? No, probably not, especially not without pharmaceutical help. However, you can be in pretty darn good shape and you can live your life. And you might be able to travel and do the things that you want to do. So let's talk about strength. So strength, a high amount of strength improves your athletic performance, right? Like you can be better at skills like jumping, sprinting, change of directions, and so on in sports-specific tests. You know, maybe you play soccer, so that's something that it definitely does. It also helps with running economy, time trial, performance, and maximal sprint speed. So that's a great thing. But most importantly, it puts muscle mass on your frame. You have muscle mass on your frame, that's fantastic because that's active tissue. It helps you again, usually eat a little bit more. Now, on top of it, your bone density is also positively affected. So definitely a winner. You want to do this. It does combat like sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle loss. So get to lifting weights. In addition, regular strength training can reduce the risk of injuries by improving your strength and your neuromuscular coordination. Now, what's important to know here is that you will be hurting at some point. If you don't do anything, you will be hurting at some point. If you work out, there's a chance you will be hurting at some point. Like even if you do everything right, 99% of the time, there's a chance that you at some point get hurt. However, the person that is fit and healthy, has muscle surrounding them, is usually recovering faster than the person that was not. So that's something to be considering. It also, strength training can also manage like chronic diseases like heart disease, arthritis, and type 2 diabetes, right? So type 2 diabetes. It affects like the insulin sensitivity of your cells. So it's a great tool right there. Arthritis, people who are stronger usually suffer from less pain. Now, if you've been physically active your whole life and your arthritis is progressing, it won't probably do much for you anymore because you've been doing it all along. And at some point you're just that far, you might actually have to consider potentially a joint replacement or surgery. But that is something that you need to talk to your healthcare professional about. Now, it also has mental health benefits. Isn't that nice? So it can help with depression issues. In that context, though, we cannot forget the cardiovascular training because every activity that we do, requires a certain amount of endurance. Even you getting up out of the chair, walking to the bathroom and saying, you know what, time to lay an egg. The reality is you got to do something and you got to be able to move from A to B. While those requirements are very little, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people already have very little to give. I've had people come to my studio who apartment and they're out of breath. They're kind of done. They did a couple of squats, like no weight, 20 squats, tired. They can't work anymore. That's not a good sign because if you think about that progressing in about another 30 years, that's not looking good. So cardiovascular training improves cellular health. It helps with the glucose receptors as well. It helps you with managing other chronic diseases, so it can lower your high blood pressure. It helps you to endure a longer duration of exercise, and so you're strength training and you're not getting tired as quickly because you're recovering faster. And it has a positive impact on the old noggin. Quality of life and cognitive abilities are part of it. So it definitely helps mitigate age-related decline. So strength training, cardiovascular training, got to do those. Now we need to touch a topic though that a lot of people do not like to talk about or actually do anything about, and that is hydration. No, it's not. Well, yes, it is, but what I'm talking about is nutrition. Hydration, are you taking enough protein? Because if you're not taking enough protein, you're working out, then your strength training is kind of for nothing because you're not having the building blocks. If you're not taking enough protein, you're also not recovering as fast, you're more likely to get hurt.